we're going to bring up is somebody who's very special for Chelanya and I, in the sense that as we started Spire, a lot of the data that we started collecting was data that we pulled from his company. His name's Bob Witeck. He's the president of, yes. He's a lifelong communicator and strategist, and I'm sorry, I'm going to read this as well. He was named by American Demographics magazine as one of the 25 national leaders who have made significant contributions to the worlds of demographics, market research, media, and trend spotting for the pioneering work on American lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. And for the past 24 years, he's led his own firm, Witeck Communications, in Washington, D.C. So please welcome Bob.
Thank you. They're not just an oil painting, they're really here. I have a confession to start with, though, because I've never really said this in a program before, but I'm openly Southern. And one of the thank you, my Richmond friends, but I was going to say, we learn to speak sometimes a little slower, but in 20 seconds, I'm going to just be a rambling New Yorker. I'm just going to let it all out. Let's get it underway. You know, when you're the secret square, you know, you've got to watch out. You've got to story yourself as an LGBT kid to figure out what words you can use and how you can ask them, because identity is a scary place. My family actually did have 9 squares, and I was in the middle because I was the only gay kid in that bunch. And growing up in the time I did, unlike I think probably the generations I'm looking at today, it was a very different place. My place in America was more like the 1950s and the 1960s, the beginning of the 60s, and it looked more like something. First I got the order wrong, but the words that I could never say out loud, I found were invented in 1869. And I realized, I thought when I saw that picture, is that what a gay person looks like? I wasn't sure. But to know that we only have almost 150 years, we didn't even have words for it. But if you grew up when I did, that's the world I grew up in, a monochromatic world, which I did plant a couple of nuns in, because I did grow up in a world where nuns reigned. And you wanted to fit in. You had no identity that stood out. And so for us, the idea of living in that world said that we got our words from everyone else. The world defined us, and it did it in a mean way. It called us names, and it did it proudly. In journals and in publications, they had no problem calling us perverts. But we had secret codes, so we created languages all our own. Before the internet, we had publications, we had parties, we had cartoons, we had every kind of way of speaking to each other in code so that we could create our own society. That's the way we lived before we realized that we had to create our own language. But words failed us. I remember growing up, going to the library, remember them? And phone booths. But the idea of going to the library and looking up words, looking at words that you couldn't say out loud because you wanted to know what they meant, and you wanted to know if you were one. I picked up, I got a dime, I went to the phone booth, and the first person I called when I was 16 was Dr. Frank Kameny. I didn't know that, like a Catholic, you go right to the Pope. You don't. You usually start out a little lower. But I ended up talking to Dr. Kameny, who knew that if black could be beautiful, that gay could be good. And changed forever this notion that we had language we could own. And what really said it all is that words were never enough. We also had pictures. We had to have film. We had to have stories. I was dumb enough in the 60s to think that was a movie I wanted to go to, where the boys are. But over time, you realize that the culture embraced us. And imagine that 20 years ago, when Ellen did this, it was that powerful that our whole nation talked about it. And today that can't happen because we have so changed in 20 years. But media was the driver. That's where words developed a story where I could fit in. And so the work that I've been doing has told me, too, that we still fail and leave people behind. Our whole transgender community has always been driven by the stories of The outliers, the Christine Jorgensens and Renee Richards, who at one time were provocative enough to tell their stories and to be labeled in such degrading ways. Bi people, bisexuals are still erased. We discovered too that we say these things. These are not just what everybody says, but LGBT people use when they speak about the bisexual experience. We still have to avoid masking people by using words that tend to deceive who people really are. And then words confine us. What we found out, of course, is that words only apply to certain among us. Some families were inside these definitions and others were not. We had to change the meaning of these words that didn't really alter their actual definitions. We just had to add ourselves to those stories. So these words renew us. They don't confine us, they just enlarge the idea. And they give us ability to speak a language that's universal. And LGBT people don't become invisible. But in addition, we know that words create and explode labels. Labels are only as good as they work. But what we're seeing today is an explosion of ideas. Identities that are giving real visibility to different kinds of colors in the spectrum. That's all they are. And thank goodness for the 21st century generation, we can take words and reclaim them. In a powerful way, take the word that was on the kill us list and transform it into a great identity that speaks to everybody. And so all of a sudden, being queer is my identity all of a sudden, a word that I could never have spoken when I was that 16-year-old. But words today are now picking fights. We're in a global battle because of our success. And what we're seeing is nations around the world are saying that our visibility, our words are propaganda, and passing laws to make us invisible again and to erase us. But words empower us. If you remember just 1 year ago, when our Attorney General, gosh, we all are nostalgic for that. And when she said that, the goosebumps I felt when she said, "We see you," which is such a powerful connector to the idea that we're not invisible. And she was saying to our trans families that we know you. And our president on a second inauguration, talking about the love that we commit to one another must be equal as well. To use the word love and to give it to us in the same way we use it with each other is such an inspiring, powerful way for us to realize that we have leaders who can do that. 130 years ago, National Geographic was first published, and who could have known this year that they could be that emboldened to take a 9-year-old, Avery Jackson, and say out to the world that the best thing about being a girl is now I don't have to pretend to be a boy. The idea that she could be that strong in her voice that she could tell the world. To me, my whole life has been based on this, the idea that words are change, words are power, words are weapons, but most of all, they truly matter. They are the ones, the LGBT community today owns a great arsenal of powerful words that have changed all of our lives.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Bob on words?
Yes. Well, first, I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm affiliated with the NGLCC. And
Oh.
I drive diversity and inclusion here in New
Sure.
York City. And the work that you did for us, that
Oh.
is tremendous. And we use it every single
Oh, I'm
day.
very, very proud of that.
And,
Thank you.
So thank you for that.
Thank you, very kind. Right over here.
Bob, good to see you. I had no idea you were presenting today, so it's great to see Christian.
Back at you.
Yeah, right. Yeah. In terms of language, how do things like imagery combine with language to help tell the story? Because the old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Right.
So, in your experience, how can we, as a community, and my personal business as a print and digital publication for the Commonwealth of Virginia,
Right.
use words and imagery to continue that narrative and provide that voice of equality?
I think actually the progress we've already made there is telling. I remember years ago, we often had conversations with journalists over saying, you go to a gay pride parade and all of a sudden you see women without their tops on, and you see wild-eyed, crazy, people in all kinds of costuming character. And first of all, I always say, first of all, that's true. Those people are real as anybody else. But the rest of us were so ashamed and afraid that we didn't even put our lives forward. In 2000, I was talking to CNN. They wanted to talk to lesbian couples, and they wanted to find lesbian couples willing and able to talk on camera. And it's just harder at those times to find people willing, well, because they could lose their jobs. Some were teachers. Some were in professions or employers that they had to risk a lot just to be out there. So the image, the people, the voice, the messenger, it's going to look more like Avery now, because her generation is truly able, willing, and honest in ways that we never were. So I'm really inspired to know that more people realize that we have that power. And second, the media is a little more sophisticated today to give a breathtaking, refreshing look at the huge, huge diversity of gender and sexual identities people have. So I think we've made tremendous progress. And to me, our magazines are what brought us there. Our media brought us there. But the rest of the media is catching up fast, and I think we have a real debt to everybody to try to get it right. Up there.
You were mentioning in one of your slides that we are starting to pick fights with
Yeah.
areas around the world that are now, there's some backlash because of some of the gains we've made.
Right.
How do we pick new words to somehow and get those words into the media so that we can help the people around the world? I'm thinking of people right now, in Chechnya and other places where they are without the proper, they don't have a voice at the moment.
I'm not sure that
How do we find the
it's
words
not
for
the
that?
language so much. I would say a couple things. One risk we have, those of us who are in the digital space, Matt Scallarud, my dear friend sitting right here, so he knows that space better than I do, is that the risk of those people in Chechnya apparently has been because of social media. So I think we have to take a great deal of painstaking care ourselves to make sure that when we are helping, commuting, supporting individuals who are in those risky places, is that we be very conscious not to identify them in ways or to share information about third parties and other people. That's the risk I think they're running today. And so it's not so much the language, but it's the idea of connecting them to authorities in different ways. Those are the real day-to-day life risking activities. And unfortunately, gay people have this deep need, as we've all had for all our lives, to connect with each other. We need to meet each other. We need to fall in love. We want to have a life. But right now, that's where we have to worry in societies where even social behavior on networks is going to be the problem, I think. Right here. I'm sorry, I haven't asked anybody over here, but go ahead.
So what forces say is behind these emerging terms like pansexual and gender fluid? And do people on surveys tend to pick the best fit if they're given terms like traditionally gay, lesbian, bisexual? And this question is like 3 parts. The third part would be, do people in the LGBTQ community tend to use the same terminology in all their social networks, or is it depend on their social network?
I think a social scientist can answer this better than I can. People try on labels as they try and close in identities, I think. So what they think they're searching for is ways to describe a variety of things. Like their identity in gender is different from their attraction to other people, as we all know. But they're trying to be more nuanced about it. They're trying to be more non-exceptional. In other words, they're simply saying, these are who I am. And I think they're like, sometimes clothes fit you for a time, then they don't. But that doesn't mean they're wrong. It simply means that they were there in the right words for you at that time. What I really was amazed to realize is that for all the terms that we can see, there are often new flags popping up that reflect them. There are flags that reflect the bisexual community today. Transgender people have a flag. There's so many. I didn't realize how many flags there were. We're going to have a UN just for all of those at some point. Maybe one more, and then we have
maybe one more. Sorry, he was. Sorry, okay.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
First, thank you for that great presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'm curious, when it comes to the media, we used to have magazines,
Right.
and people consume long-form content, and nowadays it's 140 characters. I guess, what do you see as the benefits drawbacks of kind of media consumption and the way that people take in information now being such short form content versus more in-depth profiling and articles and really being able to.
Well, I'm a dinosaur, so I'm going to die, and because I read long form. So I have to tell you, the one thing I love, and this is what I really do love, is that 21st century generations are creating new tools to use short form and digital expression, and I think there's an extraordinary power in that now. I love Twitter because what Twitter has done is forced us to think in ways that are captivating, compelling, and attention-getting. And they're not the end result. What they do is lead you to more knowledge. And I think social media done properly is connecting people with ideas that they wouldn't have otherwise found. I found New York Times, others are always sending out great links to places and publications I've never heard of, and to read stories and narratives and investigations that none of us might not have seen. We have got to get out of our own media bubbles. We got to connect with a bigger world of writers and really be global. And I think LGBT people are poised to be those navigators because we are searchers, we are hunters and navigators. That's who we are. And I think that is going to change things for the better, because I think we'll bring that knowledge and hopefully share it with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.